Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're taking a look at a monogreen +1/+1 counter deck featuring Nissa, Voice of Zendikar as our commander, recently introduced through Pioneer Masters. This 3-mana Planeswalker can plus to make an 0/1 plant token, and then a -2 to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. And then if we get to the -7 ultimate, we can also gain a bunch of life and draw a bunch of cards, but we're mostly making plans and then trying to build up a large enough board for the -2 to be worth it. And then if this deck is filled to the brim with +1 counter synergies to maybe give us additional +1 counters or double them, so that way we can get even more value out of Nissa's -2 ability. So taking a look at the breakdown of our deck here, the first category is going to be mana acceleration. We've got lots of 1-drops that can help play Nissa on turn 2 already, and then a few more cards that put additional lands onto the battlefield, since we also have a few landfall payoffs throughout the deck. Then we get to our creatures. We've got a lot of creatures with +1 counter synergy, and then we also have some artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers that will work well with those +1 counters as well. And then finally some instants and sorceries, mostly fight spells, some of which also synergize with +1 counters, and some protection spells as well that can also add more counters to the team or even make our team indestructible. So that's our deck in a nutshell. Now for the more detailed breakdown, starting with our ramp, we've got Birds of Paradise, Halfling, Mystic, Llanowar Elves, and Utopia Sprawl as kind of the 1-mana accelerants, and then a 2-mana Explorer lets us play an extra land. We now also finally have Rampant Growth on Arena, and since we have snow lands in the mana base, we're also playing Into the North. And then Incubation Druid is particularly synergistic here, since we can -2 Nissa to put a +1 counter on it, and then now it can tap for 3 mana as opposed to just 1, if we don't want to spend the 5 mana adapting it. Gala Greeters can also pick up additional counters just by making plant tokens with Nissa, or can start making treasure tokens, which is another way of ramping. And then Ordeal of Nylea can easily be sacrificed the same turn we play it if we already have some counters on our creatures, and then we can also search up 2 additional lands to put on the battlefield tapped. And then Arcane Signet can immediately tap for mana, so that's also usually worth including in most decks. Then Rishkar can distribute 2 +1 counters when he enters, and now every creature we control with a counter on it can also tap for mana. And then a Flare of Cultivation we can occasionally cast for free if we sacrifice a random creature, although it cannot be a plant token sadly, but we're also totally fine casting it for 3 mana as a Cultivate. And then our other creatures include Experiment 1 and Pelt Collector, which are both pretty similar, picking up additional counters when larger creatures enter. Pelt Collector eventually gaining Trample as well. Experiment 1 we can occasionally regenerate. Then there's Paw Patch Recruit and Swarm Shambler, which will both punish the opponent for targeting our creatures in some way, especially if they already have +1 counters on them. We've got Servant of the Scale, which begins with a +1 counter, and when it dies we can move it onto other creatures. And then both Bristly Bill and the newer Scythe Cat Cub can give us +1 counters with Landfall, the Cub potentially doubling the counters on a creature if we triggered Landfall twice, whereas Bristly Bill can potentially activate for 5 mana to double all +1 counters on our creatures. Scavenging Ooze gives us Graveyard Hate and Life Gain, in addition to more +1 counters if we exile creatures with it. We've got the Avatar, which can enter with a lot of counters if we already have some in play, also has Trample and Reach. Barkhide Troll enters with a +1 counter, can remove it to give it hexproof. The Scurry Oak also has Evolve, similar to Experiment 1, and whenever we put a +1 counter on it, whether it's with the Evolve mechanic or some other means like Nissa, we also get to make a Squirrel token, so it can also help us go wide. And now we also have an infinite combo with Scurry Oak in this deck, thanks to Ivy, Lane, Denizen being added in Jumpstart. Whenever another green creature we control enters, we can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, so with both of those in play, we can keep putting the +1 counter from Denizen on Scurry Oak, which in turn makes a Squirrel, which in turn triggers Denizen, rinse and repeat, and we've got infinite Squirrels and an infinitely large Scurry Oak. Not playing any tutor effects to assemble it, since both cards are still decent on their own, but if it lines up, it's going to be pretty awesome. And then we also have a number of Hydras, which are also a staple of +1 counter decks. Goldvein Hydra has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and will leave treasure tokens behind when it dies. There's a Wildwood Scourge, which we can play for X = 1, and it will start out small, but will naturally pick up a lot of +1 counters over time. And then Voracious Hydra can fight opposing creatures when it enters, or we can just double its counters, and then it also has built-in Trample. And then moving on to our 3-mana creatures, we've got Oran Reef Ooze giving us a counter when it enters, and giving us more counters whenever it attacks. Evolution Sage lets us proliferate whenever we enable a landfall, another reason for those ramp cards that put lands into play, and the fetch lands in the mana base, just so we can trigger a landfall twice. Kami of Whispered Hopes passively gives us more +1 counters and can also tap for a lot of mana if we can increase its power. Kodama, a way to give all our modified creatures trample, so that's a way to maybe get our bigger Hydras through that don't naturally have trample, and then if we hit the opponent we also get to ramp, putting additional lands into play. Mossborn Hydra at 3 mana is also excellent if we can enable Landfall a bunch, as we can keep doubling its +1 counters. You may have seen my standard builds of it. Then there's the Tumblewag, another way to maybe double +1 counters on a single creature if we saddle it, and can also give us an extra +1 counter each turn. Champion of Lambholt is great with all the plant tokens from Nissa, giving it more +1 counters each turn, and then can also eventually make our team unblockable. There's Yorvo, which is just big, and also picks up more counters over time. Armorcraft Judge gives us a bit of card draw for each creature we control that has a counter on it. We already discussed the Denizen. Defiler Vigor can also give us a lot of extra counters just by casting more green permanent spells, which we're interested in anyway, and can also give those a discount by just paying life for their mana cost instead. And then the Gearhulk, also a classic here, giving us 4 +1 counters distributed however we want when it enters. Then we get to some of our artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers. Hardened Scales is one of our better 1-drops in the deck, as it will give us an additional +1 counter each time. The original Ozolith can store up +1 counters in case we face a lot of removal, so we can move those around. The Fall enchantment can also eventually fight opposing creatures after giving us more counters first. We've got the Innkeeper's Talent, which can also eventually double the number of +1 counters we get. Ozolith also gives us an extra counter each time and can also activate it for 2 mana to essentially give us 2 counters at once. Ranger class can also give us more counters whenever our creatures attack if we level it up first, and eventually can start playing creatures off the top, so it gives us a bit more late game. Branching Evolution also doubles the number of counters we get. Fight Rigging gives us an extra counter each turn and can potentially cast something for free through Hideaway. There's a Tribute, which is also great with the plant tokens from Nissa, which will now enter with 2 counters on them, and larger creatures will immediately draw us a card. And then a Vivian Arcbow Ranger, despite not having a sideboard to use the -5, is still great, since the +1 gives us counters and trample, whereas the -3 gives us removal. And then a Nissa Who Shakes the World is a reason why we are not going too deep with the non-forest cards in the mana base, and instead gets to double our mana basically, while also putting more counters on our lands to turn those into creatures. And then the Great Henge can also give us a source of extra card advantage and +1 counters. And then some of our instants and sorceries include lots of fight effects, like Blizzard Brawl. That's the reason why we have those snow-covered basics in the mana base as well. We've got the Battle Glyph, which can maybe give us a counter and fight right away. Snakeskin Veil, a way to protect our creatures through hexproof and a counter. Ant's Fury, another fight spell that gives us a counter if our creature's large enough. Fangs of Colonia, we can overload for 6 mana to give all our creatures a bunch of extra counters, especially if they had some to begin with. Then the Inscription is an instant speed fight spell, but especially if we can kick it for 5 mana total, can also gain life and give us more counters in the process. And then finally Inspiring Call, a way to give our team indestructible until end of turn, as well as drawing a card for each creature we control that has a counter on it. And then the mana base, as we mentioned, lots of forests for Nissa, and then some of our utility lands include Karn's Bastion, which we can activate to proliferate, great with our planeswalkers as well, as we can add extra loyalty counters. And then a Nykthos can also give us a big mana boost, since we have a lot of green devotion throughout, some cards producing 2 or even 3 devotion by themselves, and then just a lot of fetch lands, as well as our Boseiju, which can maybe deal with opposing artifacts and enchantments as well. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Loot, the key to everything, so kind of a value landfall deck. Our hand has potential if the Druid survives, although still would prefer a 3rd land as well. But yeah, Druid's excellent with Rishkar and Nissa putting a counter on it, because then it can give us a nice mana boost. I think we try it. We can also play the Recruit on 1. Might can eventually blow up the Fall or a Great Henge, so I guess if we can bait out our opponents kind of using it on the enchantment here, that's probably the better outcome. Found land number 3. That way we can potentially tap the Druid for 3 mana right away. And pass it back. Tarmogoyf makes sense in this deck, since our opponent's aiming to put a lot of different card types on the battlefield. For now an Uro. If they hold full control here, they can tap the Mox Amber for a mana, which is what they do. Tarmogoyf grows. And we'll take 2. Alright, so this turn kind of lacking Rishkar. Counter on both Druid and Recruits. And then we can still either fall, Tribute, or Nissa. What makes more sense? We want to bait out the Might and at the same time set up our Henge. Yeah, I guess fall is fine for now. Tribute's also better if we can keep it around. And then I don't mind the land. Do we need a Hydra? The Hydra's not bad in combination with Nissa, so might be able to keep both. And just pass it back for now. Opponent's gonna Brainstorm. They might have a fetch land to go with it to shuffle away the cards they put back on top. And they've got Nissa, Resurgence, Birds, since Mox Amber is now online, but yeah, no fetch land it seems. So we'll take 3. Get to untap with our fall, get 2+1 counters, put them on Rishkar. So now all our creatures can tap for mana. And then we want to probably tap them before tapping any of our forests if the plan is to play Nissa. Tap that for mana, untap. And then we have a few options. I mean, I could mostly empty my hand here, but might want to keep Henge as a leftover. So let's just go Tribute, and then Nissa make a plant. Which will also pick up the counters from Tribute. And then don't mind trading for Nissa. So it can hit for 3. And then we've got a Hydra coming up with a lot of mana to potentially sink into it. A Roaming Throne. Could name Beast or Noble here. Names Homunculus instead, so they can draw 2 with Fibblethip. Do they have a lane to go with Nissa? Does not seem to be the case. And I'll just trade for their Animist here, I think. Alright, so we'll also get to Chapter 3 from Fall. Could just take out Tarmogoyf, could pay the ward on the Roaming Throne, although it's naming Homunculus, so how much do we really care? Tarmogoyf down. And then, what's the move? Might want to get the Henge going. Or we can just sink all our mana into this Goldvein Hydra. Can minus. And start swinging. But I kind of like Henge first. So this would be x equals 7. Yeah, that's got to be enough. We'll get to draw off Tribute. And of Great Henge. And now this Avatar is going to be enormous. Nissa can just make another plant, and then next turn we can -2. And I'm not gonna trade Rishkar for Fibblethip, but just play birds. Not a bad turn. And we'll just attack with the Hydra. And then second main I can still play Ozolith. I guess if we did trade for Fibblethip, we deny Moxamber from making a mana. So maybe that wouldn't have been too bad. But the opponent needs something like a River's Rebuke to bounce our stuff back, which they very well may have in hand. Just gonna be an Uro escaped out of the graveyard. That's not quite good enough. And a Roaring Furnace can maybe take out one creature. And then get a +1 counter on maybe the birds at this point. And that also gets doubled by Ozolith. And yeah, opponent is pretty dead on board here, especially if we fire up Nissa, minus our commander here, putting 2 +1 counters on the team thanks to Ozolith, and who knows what else we draw. Could also just proliferate once again with the Bastion, which also gets doubled by Ozolith, so that's more than enough. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Nicol, Bolas, God-Pharaoh, so Grixis control. Our hand's missing creatures, although creatures are also likely to die in this matchup, so maybe I'll still keep. And then I do want to get Hardened Scales in play before they can maybe take it away with a discard spell. Turn 2 Into the North still sets up turn 3 Nissa. And then Fabled Passage is untapped. Opponent with an Agent offer Fiend. Okay. Gonna stick to the plan here. And then Inspiring Call could be good in the face of a sweeper. Gonna hang on to the Fabled Passage in case we draw some landfall cards in the near future.
I will draw the poison from this dying world. Do not be fooled. I am no pacifist.
Nissa will take 1.
Your advantage is temporary.
And Laughing Jasper to try and steal our cards. Alright, so what's the plan? I think it's minus Nissa to get 2 +1 counters, and then I can play Inscription Kicked to take out Jasper. And do this while our opponent's tapped out. And then I probably want to keep the token back, even though there's a good chance it gets removed. Maybe I should attack, and then I'm fine if Nissa dies, just to get the chance to maybe get Henge in play. Because now our opponent is less incentivized to take out the plant.
Tell the Gate Witch, I'm sorry.
Opponent reanimates Jasper. So that's once again a problem. And our opponent's got 3 mana up, so possible they have a counter for the Great Henge. I think I still try to resolve it here. And then I could play Tribute afterwards. Alright, return the favor to copy the activated ability or triggered ability. So our opponent got to basically ramp here. Alright, fair enough. So Henge resolves, play Tribute, and attack. Jasper steals an Armorcraft Judge. not quite as good on their side of the battlefield. And then Armorcraft Judge with no card draw. Alright, so we're just looking to make some creatures now. I can play Nissa, make a plant. Get some counters. I guess I can make 8 mana here, but I probably want to keep Inspiring Call available, and I wouldn't be able to proliferate with a Bastion. But yeah, let's attack for 5. Opponent now found a Gearhulk. That one's a bit better. And a Lootmonger. So they're definitely going for the steal your stuff theme. They were probably sad to hear about Grenzo nerf. Opponent playing our mana creatures, which would be pretty good on our side of the battlefield with a Great Henge and Tribute, giving us counters and drawing cards. And House Melds, exiling a creature. So can make them indestructible, but that's not going to be good enough. Would still draw me 2 cards. Is that worth it? Yeah, I think so. Could have technically still drawn into like a Snakeskin Veil, but wasn't meant to be. We lose Nissa. Can still replay that one pretty easily.
Forgive me.
And a creature. Start there. Ooh, Mossborn Hydra with a fetch land too. So let's see here. Probably time to tap Nykthos. Play the Hydra. Could have also stacked the triggers differently, but I kind of want to just maximize card draw as well.
I must heal this land.
For now, make a plant. That one does not trigger Great Henge,
I must cleanse this card.
but Vista will trigger the Hydra. I think for now I'm fine playing the Troll. Keep Rampant Growth for next turn to enable the Hydra even more. Alright, and then sure hit for 5. Our opponent can play Nicol Bolas next turn, although 7 damage is nowhere near enough to take out our Hydra. Opponent found some more goodies. Can they remove my Hydra? If they can, we still have maybe Nissa that can -2. Voracious Hydra can remove one of their creatures. But yeah, this is kind of the ideal setup against a Planeswalker control deck normally. Have a bunch of artifacts and enchantments and even lands that provide value, which are harder for Grixis to interact with. If we just curved out with a bunch of creatures, then some efficient removal spells could have taken care of those pretty easily. So are we going to see Nicol Bolas? It's going to be a Wildwood Scourge for 0 and just to make a treasure. And an attack. What do we make of this? Maybe there's a board wipe incoming, and our opponent's going to lose their creatures anyway. Still maybe avoid blocking with a Hydra, although what trick could they have? Are they going to give their creatures Death Touch all of a sudden? I doubt it. Could have swapped the blocks to maybe play around a damage-based sweeper better, but yeah. Opponent was going to wipe the board, so it didn't matter. Well, now we got to rebuild, but yeah, once again with Henge and Tribute, it's feasible. And now Rishkar. So let's say we play Hydra, X equals 3 is already enough. With Hardened Scales, it will enter with 4 counters. But may as well make it a little bit bigger. There's a Snakeskin Veil, that could be important. And then probably time to tap Nykthos, and then I can still activate Karn's Bastion afterwards. Explore, also Lith is good to have. And activate Bastion. And then, sure, we'll play Signet, still keeps up Veil. And pass a turn, and then next turn I could maybe ultimate Nissa if we proliferate first. Although Nicol Bolas could also take out our Planeswalker. Displacer Kitten doesn't have anything to flicker right now. And Nicol Bolas goes for the plus, which finds an Ents Fury. So I guess they can use a Displacer Kitten to reset it, but there's nothing beneficial to fight. So opponent tries their luck again with Nicol Bolas, finds an Innkeeper's Talent, and yeah, that's game over. Alright, so ended up being a pretty grindy game here, but things worked out for us. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Karametra, God of Harvests. So a deck that can produce a lot of extra mana. Our hand has potential, just need to find a couple extra lanes along the way. But Hardened Scales is always tempting to keep. And then Nissa provides the creatures for us. Turn to Greenseeker, another way to find additional lanes. And then now got a few alternatives. Explore for starters. Find Scurry Oak. Ooh, can we actually showcase the Denizen Scurry Oak combo? That would be exciting. So I'm actually down to just sack Pelt Collector to Flare of Cultivation to make sure we keep hitting those land drops. Yeah, this is a pretty degenerate combo if we can pull it off, but our deck's not really playing a lot of tutor effects, so chances of actually drawing both aren't all that great, but of course individually they still have good synergy throughout. So yeah, play Scurry Oak, followed up with a Denizen, which lets us evolve, makes a squirrel, which gives us a +1 counter, put it on Scurry Oak, rinse and repeat. Although opponent is keeping up mana, so do we have to be afraid of interaction as well. So how do we want to sequence? This turn I could go Talent plus Nissa, and then maybe delay the Scurry Oak until we level up the Talent more to protect. Yeah, there's a few ways we could go about it. Let's see if there's a response to the talent. There isn't. Yeah, I'll slow play it here. There's also a chance our opponent is playing a bunch of board wipes. So then going infinite doesn't necessarily win us the game. But so far so good. Going to be an Oracle, and Sylvan Primordial on top, also recent addition from Pioneer Masters. Alright, so definitely looking to Scurry Oak here. So Experiment 1 into Scurry Oak. Can still level up the Innkeeper's Talent as well. And then how about a -2? And then next turn, yeah, we should still be able to combo off one way or another.
You will not ruin this world.
Alright. Counter on the squirrel. Hit you for 4. And then I can just play Denizen, make a plant, which will also set the combo in motion. Mythweaver shows up, so don't really feel bad about comboing my opponents. Just gotta hope they don't have any board wipes in hand. Opponent fetched away the Mythweaver to play a Primordial. And goes for the talent, that's fine. Alright, so coast is clear. Ooh, Ondo Inversion, no, opponent keeps it on top. That is a board wipe. So, that's exactly what we didn't want him to have. So now if I combo, make infinite squirrels, our opponent just says, sure, play 8 mana. Inversion and get rid of everything. Oh man, why did it have to show up? I guess the only hope is that I draw into a way to make my team indestructible. Inspiring Call could do it. But yeah, I'll have to draw it soon. So combo denied. Don't even have a good attack. And there's Karametra. That one survives the Ondo Inversion. But yeah, I just kind of have to sit here until I draw Inspiring Call, and then I can try and go for it. And in the meantime, our opponent gets to do whatever they want. So I guess trying to ultimate Nissa to draw is our best way forward. And Primordial attacks. Could try and double or triple block it. Let's see. Yeah, we can regenerate Experiment 1 potentially, but we're not gonna know if they put it first or not. So I kind of have to decide now whether or not I regenerate it. Yeah, that's fine. Even though regeneration's a way to save it from the Ondo Inversion. I don't think we're winning the game with one creature. So our opponent does take out the Experiment 1. And even though we have a landfall payoffs, I think I still fetch to thin out the deck in the hopes of drawing Inspiring Call. I would be able to play it alongside the Denizen, so that would be an epic top deck. Ooh, Champion of Lambhold. Wait a minute, is that enough to combo kill here? I believe it is. Because with each iteration of the loop we generate a squirrel, which gives Champion a +1 counter, also doubled by our hardened scales, but it doesn't really matter here, since we can just put all the counters on Scurry Oak, get it up to 21 power, and then with Champion we'll eventually get to enough power where our team is unblockable and win the game. So yeah, that should get it done. Yeah, I guess we have a few ways to make creatures have trample as well, so that also could have done it. Like Kodama, making Scurry Oak gain trample. But I believe this will do it too. And then, yeah, Champion of Lambhold passively keeps picking up more counters. Thanks to the squirrels entering. And then at some point it's going to be large enough for Scurry Oak to be unblockable. Wow. So I'm glad we still managed to show off the combo here. And then Scurry Oak needs to go up to at least 21 power. Could probably change some settings here to automatically trigger our abilities. So we're already up to 21 power, although I still need to make sure Champion of Lambhold goes to at least 6 power, but we should be there already. So the rest can now go on Champion. And that's 25 power, and I'll even -2 here for funsies. And then I could technically keep comboing, but there's no need. Alright, sweet. Ondo inversion in hand, but still managed to combo off. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Muldrotha, a graveyard deck. This hand feels a little slow. Yeah, this hand with Hardened Scales is more promising. Even though we don't have a great turn 2 play, might just get the fetch line out of the way instead. Although now we can hang on to it. Since we do have some landfall payoffs in the deck we can draw. And it's guaranteed to be untapped. Turn 2 Baleful Strix, that's a nice one. Also an artifact, so good to have lots of types for Muldrotha. Voracious Hydra, I could play X equals 0. Just to have a creature on the battlefield. I don't think that's where we want to be. So I'll just pass. And an Oracle of the Alpha. So hopefully our opponent doesn't draw Ancestral or Black Lotus anytime soon. Okay, Halfling's a bit late to the party. So if I go for Nissa, make a plant, it will get pressured by their flyers, so that doesn't seem great. So we'll go for the Ooze. Get 2+1 counters thanks to Hardened Scales. And then next turn we can Hydra for X equals 2, which will be 3 counters, enough to take out the Oracle. Opponent immediately drew a Mox Sapphire. And now a Dark Ritual as well, so they could play Muldrotha. It's gonna be a Palantir instead. And an Analyst. Milling some cards. Oracle bottoms with his Cry. Palantir we're gonna mill here. Alright, so can hang on to the fetch lands still. And with only 1 land in graveyard, Analyst isn't a huge threat. So yeah, we don't have to Voracious Hydra. Could go Halfling plus Nissa, Voice of Zendikar. Although next turn I probably want to play Nissa Who Shakes the World plus maybe an Inscription after untapping our land. So yeah, I could see the benefit of Voracious Hydra. And then take out Oracle of the Alpha. And then we don't have to attack if we don't want to trade for the Strix. It's going to be a Marauder making us sack a creature. Goodbye, Hydra. Our opponent's down to 1 card in hand. Although we are gonna start losing a lot of life to the Palantir. Alright, so still in favor of Nissa, who shakes the worlds, so we can start making more mana here. That resolves. And then I can still tap this for 2 mana. I don't have to Inscription, since I don't necessarily want to lose any of my creatures to the Strix if we were to fight it, so I'll just go for Gala Greeters. Could have also decided to fight Analyst, because now with the fetch land, they can get quite a bit of value from it. Time for Muldrotha, perhaps. Palantir triggers. At any point we could just die if our opponent reveals a bunch of expensive cards. Alright, that's gonna hurt. 10 damage, we're at 7. But now we get to untap with a ton of mana. And the Inscription can also gain life for what it's worth. So do we want to just go for Nissa, untap a land? I guess I don't need to tap all of my mana yet. Nissa might want to go for +1 counters. Let's gain 2 life here. And then now minus 4 +1 counters. Get 2 on each thanks to Hardened Scales, attack, and then I can still play Inscription with Kicker, thanks to my Vigilant lands. And then we get to choose all 3 modes. 2 +1 counters on, let's say, a land. And then we gain life. And then we can fight maybe Halfling with a Strix. Because if we go for Analyst, they can sack it anyway. So they could have jumped first. But they might just be dead here. Ooh, Fog. Was not expecting that one, but that makes sense. So the fight still happens. But our opponent doesn't take any damage. Fog recently added to Arena through Pioneer Masters, I believe. Otherwise, you could only get it through Alchemy cards. So there's Muldrotha, now 4 mana available. They can replay Marauder and a Strix. Strix as their artifact, Marauder as their creature. That would be pretty decent. But they're still maybe facing lethal next turn. But yeah, that was undoubtedly a setback. I guess our opponent doesn't have the right colors to play Strix. So not sure if that was intentional. They can still play a fetch land as well. And their only land that they could fetch maybe enter tapped, since they already fetched Island. I see Kaya's Ghost form on Muldrotha. And we're gonna lose more life. Alright, that was 12 damage. But now we can make a plant. Go for +1 counters, I believe. Animate a forest. And then we should have just enough going through. Thanks to the ooze trigger, opponent can chump or 12-12 and still take over 30 damage. Alright, so ended up being very close. If our opponent does get back tricks, I believe they still die here, since we had just enough. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Vadrok, so Jeskai mutate. And our hand is weirdly aggressive, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Can start with... There's a chance I want to play this with Offspring. It also grows Pelt Collector, although I'm kind of locked into turn 2 Incubation Druid, since upside's very high with Nissa. So, yeah, might still be Pelt Collector on 1. So, hit for 1, play Druid. Because if next turn we can play Nissa, put a counter on it, then it can immediately make 3 mana for us. Opponent flashes in Mastermind. And passes once again. Okay, so see if Nissa resolves. And does not mana drain, so our opponent's going to have 3 additional mana next turn. That's painful. Although we can still play a 1-drop, make it Servant. And a Goldspan Dragon is a great way to spend that extra mana from mana drain. So they cannot quite play Vadrok, since this can only make 1 color of mana. Alright, so you could try Nissa once again. Although I think I prefer double spelling this turn, and then we can play Nissa and tap Incubation Druid for 3 mana right away, instead of having to tap it first. So that means maybe Troll plus Recruit. Maybe Recruit first, so we can grow Pelt Collector twice. And then the longer we wait on Avatar, the more counters it will pick up. Opponent just drawing with Think Twice. So yeah, if they've got a big expensive spell here, they can cast it and we'll be in trouble. And Niv Mizzet is certainly one of them. We draw. Still gonna stick to the plan here. Nissa minus, and try and put counters on the team. Opponent's gonna draw a response. Niv Mizzet triggers. And can still put my counters elsewhere. So we're gonna get 1 counter from Nissa, so I guess Troll and Pelt Collector makes sense. And it's only 1 damage here. And then with the flashback, they can still deal 1 additional damage. And our opponent actually finished off Nissa with the 1 extra damage. So Incubation Druid does survive. So I can still play the Avatar. And that's pretty big. And then send in Troll and Pelt Collector. Avatar also has Reach, so it can actually block their flyers. Alright, let's see what happens. Plenty of infinite combos with Niv Mizzets. Cleansing Wildfire. We'll trigger Niv Mizzet a few times already. Our life total is dwindling. So if they have removal for Avatar, we could just die. Prismari commands for the redraws. And the treasure also makes 2 mana with Goldspan. So pretty likely that they find an answer. Brainstorm, draw 3, so yeah, that's 3 more Niv Mizzets triggers. And then they can just attack all out and win the game. So no removal needed, just enough damage to the face. Even though Avatar can block Niv Mizzets. And a Paths is gonna take care of it, I suppose. Alright, I mean, this game was certainly won in part thanks to the early mana drain, ramping out the Goldspan Dragon. And those are some of the swingy cards you're gonna encounter in Brawl. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Tatyova, blue-green, a landfall ramp. So we do want to be off to a quick start. This hand feels a little slow. Alright, this is a slight improvement. If we can maybe ramp out the Defiler, we can go off. Bill's not bad with double fetch land. So that might get the nod over Rampant Growth. And then Rampant Growth triggers Bill, and also sets up a turn 4 Defiler, if that's what we want to do. Fanatic isn't bad either. Now we could play Tumblewag. And then Bill can grow up to a 4-4 at the very least. And it's going to be a Timeless Witness, getting back the fetch land. Okay. I think I'm still okay playing the fetch land out. And go for, I want to say Tumblewag. Which can put a counter on itself. And then next turn, we could maybe draw with Armorcraft Judge, which also saddles the Tumblewag, 2 double counters. Our opponent can now play Tatyova, but Emergent Sequence is gonna go first. Opponent probably wants to get immediate value of Tatyova. 3 mana left. And a Mystic Sanctuary could put something back on top, like an Emergent Sequence. Nice that it's fetchable as an island. So our opponent could easily have Counterspell mana up. So maybe we want to double spell Gala Greeter's Rampant Growth. It doesn't seem like they had a counter. But yeah, I'll still go with fetch land. Can put a counter on Gala Greeters so it can saddle the Tumblewag. And then still main phase the Rampant Growth. Bill's a 10-10. And our opponent took it, so we might see some bounce spell here, send our creatures packing. Or Bonnie to stabilize. And then if they attack, they might be able to put another land in play. Okay. But we have the option of just activating Bill to double counters once again. So our opponent's still probably forced to chump. So we'll saddle. Attack. So both our creatures are lethal. And then second main, I can now maybe play the Armorcraft Judge to refuel. And Gala-Greeters makes a treasure. And play Talents, although now we did miss out on the trigger. Yeah, could have maybe main-faced Armorcraft Judge, since our opponent was pretty much forced to chump. Now Tatyova with a fetch land. Kodama can give our team trample, so our opponent won't be able to chump block our huge creatures as easily. So this might be game. Yeah, I guess we'll just keep it simple and go for Kodama plus Branching Evolution. Evolution first, so the Gala-Greeters can get more counters. And then that should be game. Can level up. And that'll do it. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing the Myco Tyrant, so a self-mill deck. Our hand is missing some cheap mana acceleration, so I think we can do better. Alright, once again, not the best hand, but Scavenging Ooze should be decent in this matchup. So I'll keep based on our Ooze here. And then Lanor Elves a little bit late to the party, although could still be the play. Or we can just play like a troll. Sure. And then next turn we can double spell, Bill, play a land, play an Elves. Mesmeric Orb, alright, so that's gonna start milling both players. So plenty of fuel for the Ooze. But our opponent's mostly interested in milling themselves. So if they play their commander, they already get to make some fungus tokens. It's going to be a Dark Ritual instead, so 5 mana for a Myco Tyrant plus something else. A Skull Prophet, fair enough. Okay, Fabled Passage is excellent with Bill. So we have a few options. Maybe save the Fabled Passage for next turn. Although, nah, I could run it out now. Put 2 counters on Bill. Start by attacking with Troll and Bill. And then I could technically use the 5 mana activated ability. But I think I would rather just Play the Ooze in the fall. The Scry 2 is not going to be very helpful when we're about to mill more cards, but sure, we can keep those on top. Play Ooze, and then nothing I need to exile right now. So if our opponent is planning to reanimate stuff, we'll have the Ooze available to respond. Driven to Despair, could also exile it before they get to cast Aftermath half, although only have a forest in hand, so it's not a disaster. It's going to be a Crawler next. Choose a card in graveyard, conjure a duplicate into their graveyard. Exile permanent from their graveyard, they can play it. Alright, that's a lot of text. I guess I'll use the Ooze now. Exile the Broodlord. Opponent can still activate Skull Prophets. And they found a Vorinclex. Although they don't have Descent 8 enabled yet. But yeah, lots of fungus tokens. Right, 2 counters I can put on the Llanowar Elves. And then what if I just attack with everyone? With a plan of activating Bill. Yeah, I guess I'm still better off putting counters on the Ooze. And then play a land, another counter on Bill maybe. And then attack with the larger creatures. With a plan of activating Bill. And I can even activate Ooze one more time. So that's a chump block. And another forced chump, basically. Could keep Ooze available. Now let's get in more damage now. Opponent falls to 2. And then probably no need to Flare of Cultivation. Although maybe it's fine actually. So can our opponent win the game with a bunch of tokens? Shifting Woodland could also copy something out of the graveyard. Although they won't trigger the Enter the Battlefield ability from Craterhoof. And Nightmare can return stuff. And yeah, luckily for us, the fungus tokens cannot block. Activate Nightmare, get back their commander. I guess they didn't send it back to the command zone, since they could just reanimate it. And now a Shadow Spear as well. But yeah, the Ooze is putting in work. Opponents trying their best. But they look pretty dead on board to me, unless Mycotyrant is big enough to stabilize, but I doubt it. Because we can just activate Bill once again. GG's. And our opponent explodes. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Tinybones, a discard deck. And sure, we can try this. Llanowar Elves can maybe set up turn 2 Nissa, although now Inquisition can take it. No, goes for Pelt Collector, so possible they have a different answer for the Elves. There's Tinybones. And happy enough playing Nissa and making a plant.
No land will suffer under my watch. I must cleanse this corrupted land.
Cavern on Phyrexian. Jet Medallion to discount their black spells. And the Mind Spike can have another look. Ozolith is probably our best card here in the immediate future. Great Henge eventually is going to be great, but that's going to take a while. Alright, so this turn we have a few options, including Ozolith minus Nissa, maybe even set up a fight. Although, might be a little drastic. Yeah, I could just make another plant. But I actually don't hate going for counters. Just to set up our defenses. And then just pass with our instants available. Could also activate Ozolith. But then if they remove the plants, Nissa's more exposed. So I'll just keep up both instants. Bandit's Talon makes me discard. I think Snakeskin Veil is going to be more useful than the Inscription. Not too worried about Tinybones. And I play Crafter. Alright, that gets around Snakeskin Veil. Could also sack the Planeswalker, but I think it's still going to be more useful to keep in play. So the game goes on. Gearhulk was a good draw. Even though it does force me to tap out. And then we probably already have a big enough Gearhulk. Although one counter still goes a long way with Ozolith. Shieldred's a good one. And a Thoughtseize takes Snakeskin Veil. And then the Bandit's Talent can try and take over, although Karn's Bastion was a pretty nice land to draw. So yeah, probably still making a plant here. And then we can proliferate as an instant. Do we attack with plants? I guess I can attack with Llanowar Elves and Gearhulk, and then the plant on defense with Bastion can still trade for Shieldred. Although our opponent's also going to be able to play those cards from exile to potentially fight. Although fight is still a trade. I guess we should be looking over here. Yeah, I guess let's see. They could go Snakeskin Veil into a fight, and then this would be a 5-6. This would be a 5-6 as well. So then I guess we just attack with a plan, keep Gearhulk back. And they may not have seen this interaction coming. So Shieldred down. Opponent now reading Bastion and Ozolith. Slasher is also a good one. More Death Touch creatures we need to get past. And can also now fight with the Inscription to take out the Gearhulk. Okay, fair enough. At least it will be tapped now. And this I can take one.
The answers are within my reach.
Could keep the land in hand. If I play it, I could technically activate both Ozolith and Karn's Bastion. That could be worth it. Could also just attack for 7 or even more if I activate the Bastion and keep land in hand. Alright, opponent has seen enough. Yeah, I think just go for Bastion, hit him for 9, add more loyalty to Nissa, the plants can distract Tinybones, and then sooner or later we can minus Nissa as well to take over. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We are facing the First Sliver, typically 5-color good stuff. So this hand can cast turn 2 Nissa. Nykthos makes mana, which can maybe set up an overloaded Fangs. Yeah, at least there's a plan here. So I'll try it. So the plan is go wide with some plants and then slam down Fangs of Colonia to try and end the game. And Bristly Bill isn't bad, but still gonna prioritize Nissa. And then next turn we can maybe double spell Pelt Collector into Bill into a land. Opponent cycles the Eagles of the North. So if our opponent's playing a bunch of Cyclers plus First Sliver, it kind of implies that they're looking to cascade into one specific card to maybe win the game on the spot. We've seen cards like Cultivator Colossus, but that of course only works if they also Tybalt's Trickery, and then they can't afford to play the Cyclers, so it's gotta be something else. I think I should still play Nykthos in case I draw another utility land next turn. And then counter here.
All things deserve protection.
So we could already overload the Fangs next turn. And Glassworks can take out one of my creatures. It's gonna be Bill. And a Gold Vein. So yeah, this is 4, 5, 6. Overload Fangs. Let's say we minused. Still not quite enough. So I think this turn we're just going to play a large Hydra. And then I'm not actually opposed to minusing Nissa 2 turns in a row. That way our Fangs is going to be a little bit more impactful. And I suppose we're also threatening lethal with what we have in play. So next turn our opponent can cast the First Sliver. In the meantime they might be limited to casting some clunky spell. Well, that one's pretty good. Although we get some treasures for our troubles, which will still be enough to overload the Fangs, which should be good enough. I guess play Ooze first. And then we want to maximize +1 counters before we overload. And then I'll stamp manually because I don't trust auto-tapper. And smash, and there we go. Feel free to let me know in the comments what card our opponent was trying to cascade into. I'm curious. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing the Scarab God, so maybe a zombie deck. Our hand is missing some mana acceleration. Rishkar on 3 could help, but we also only have the 2 lands at the moment. Alright, I guess we'll try this. Mainly on the strength of Ordeal of Nylea here. For now, could already play the Scourge. Or we could get a Ranger class going. I'll go with the Scourge. Next turn, likely still play our commander. Alright, a Lich Lord does confirm zombies. Can hang on to my fetch lands.
The wild can never be contained. I am no friend of yours.
And then next turn, could already consider Branching Evolution.
What I expected.
Or we can double spell our 2-drops, or even level up the Ranger class. Recruit's not bad either. But let's go for the mana efficient turn.
Do not be fooled. I am no pacifist.
Don't really want to ordeal in the face of open mana. Counter on the plant, which in turn grows the Hydra. And now we're setting up for a powerful branching evolution turn. If we can play it, and then -2 Nissa. Landfall creatures would also be welcome, since we have Ordeal and a fetch land to go with it. It's going to be a Death Priest bumping their zombies. And I guess we'll save Nissa by jumping. Opponent did get to make a skeleton token that way. But yeah, I think our plan is a go here. So, a recruit for 1 mana. Evolution. And then minus. Our Hydra is enormous. And I'll play the fetch lane, but we don't need to sacrifice it yet. And then leveling up Ranger class all the way could be a solid mana sink. Now, as long as we don't have Trample on the Scourge, our opponent can probably manage it pretty easily. And they're just going to remove it now. So counter on the Wolf. Because yeah, in theory our opponent could also just play Scarab God and chum block with it over and over and keep returning it to their hand. Kefnut, another God. This one goes back into their library, 3rd from the top. And also zombie. Alright, take our turn, find a land. So I'll level up a Ranger class. See a land on top, can shuffle that away. See another land on top, so with Ordeal we can shuffle that away as well. And then probably go on the Recruit, since that one at least tramples. And then it will get 2+1 counters. And then 2 more from the Ranger class, so it should be pretty large.
Why won't you listen?
And I can probably afford to attack with Wolf as well. Inscription of Abundance on top, so that can maybe clear some creatures next turn. Opponent double blocks. And our opponent decided to leave it in the graveyard to maybe get back with a Scarab God later. Or I guess with a Lich Lord. So yeah, we'll see what they do. They need some more removal to keep up. If they just tap out for a creature, they might be in trouble once we draw the inscription. Could maybe even -2 Nissa once again. And eventually the Ranger class is gonna pull us ahead. Opponent's got a Liliana, which will make a zombie. And no attacks. Alright, champion on top as well. That's gonna be worth playing. And a Tumblewag. Still seems worth it. And a Hardened Scales is gonna be a great top deck as well. So now if I -2 Nissa, our creatures become pretty much unblockable.
Please know that I tried.
So yeah,
Cleanse this corrupted land.
our opponent should just be dead now. We've got 5 power on the champion, and our opponent's only got 3 powered creatures, so didn't even need the inscription here. Sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Jaxis, the Troublemaker. So our opponent's going to have some cards with powerful enter the battlefield abilities and attack triggers. Ragavan, that's, yeah, one of those. Play Halfling, and I might have to just trade here, given the chance, even though I can play turn 2 Nissa. The plans don't line up all too well versus Ragavan, and our opponent's got removal anyway. Alright, so now I guess turn 2 Troll can block Ragavan. And then a third land is helpful. So next turn could go for Tribute. Since if we go for Nissa, there's a chance they can take it out before we get too much value. Captain Lannery is a good one too, especially with a treasure in play already. Although we can still block Ragavan. Still tempted to trade, because it kind of forces him to sack a treasure. Okay. And then, yeah, I guess Ragavan gets another attack in. Not much I can do about it, unless we want to play Nissa, make a plant. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work out too well for me. But I could try. It's just that those treasures in the early turns can make a huge difference. So I want to avoid Ragavan hitting us at all costs. A Requisitioner with Blitz, both at Nissa, so now I may as well block the Requisitioner. Alright, so I guess that worked out. And now Hardened Scales plus Tribute looks good. And our plan's going to be pretty big.
You will not ruin this world.
So we can make a 3/4 each turn with Nissa. Also way to trigger the Gala Greeters right away. Ooh, sneak attack. Well, that could just be game over here if our opponent's got the right creatures in hand. Pay a mana to cheat something into play. And a Wormcoil Engine is a good one, since it'll leave those worm tokens behind. Still seems worth it to save Nissa. So they didn't have a second creature to sneak into play at least. And Nykthos makes a bunch of mana for us. Okay. So let's see if we want to sequence properly. I guess it's Gala Greeters before tapping Nykthos. And get some counters. Nissa makes a plant. And go for additional counters. And I'm fine just main phasing this removal, I think. Although could have kept up Inscription at instant speed as well. Played with kicker. All 3 modes. Alright, so we get to see our monogreen +1 counter deck in action. And yeah, it seems pretty decent once it gets a few of those additional +1 counter engines going. And then Nissa is a pretty sticky threat, so it's not that easy for most decks to remove. And then it can start generating value turn after turn. Definitely not the most explosive commander out there. There are cards that are much more powerful if they can stick around, but the advantage of Nissa is that it's a bit harder to remove than most other creatures at least. So yeah, a fun deck. Definitely not the most powerful +1 counter deck you could build. Maybe Vorinclex claims that title, but maybe you'll end up facing weaker decks overall, which will increase the win rates and hopefully lead to more fun games as well. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.